Welcome to PetAbility. I'm your host, Cathy Simons.
And I'm your host, Chris Cranston. Our podcast provides interviews and information to help your pets live their best lives.
Morning, Chris. How are you?
I'm well, Cathy. A little warm out, but surviving.
Ooh, it is so warm out there. People, please be careful with your pets out there. The pavement is hot. It's humid. I don't know what part of the country you're in. We're in New England, and it is hot.
I think I saw in the weather, it's a heat wave across the nation.
Is it? All right. People, please just be careful with your pets out there.
Yeah.
Check the pavement. One of the things I think people might not think about is not only is it hot out there for us and it's hot out there for them, but their feet are making contact with the ground and that pavement gets really hot. So if you're standing around chatting with your friend and that pavement's real hot and your dog's standing, just keep an eye on that.
I think there's a test. You're supposed to put your hand on the pavement, and if you can't hold it there for like a count of 3, 5, something like that, it's not very long.
Seconds. Yeah, it's not very long.
And they say then it's too hot for your pet to be walking on that pavement.
So in any case, I got to go over to my best friend's house the other day. I've known since high school. She got herself a little kitten, little Maisie.
Aww.
Let me ask you this. Oh, she's so cute. And I loved her. We had so much fun. Let me ask you this. What compels us as humans to want to, and the desire to boop the kitten's nose? Or doesn't? Like, why? Just boop. What is that? It's like some I mean, you do it, right?
I don't know if I do it, Cathy. This may be you.
Boop? No. The boop on the all right. Okay.
Well, I can't say that I
can't. I couldn't. I almost couldn't take it. She was so cute. I just like booped her and squeezed her and just purred in my ear. So much fun.
Yeah. I like to schnuzzle them. I like to put them right up in my neck, like under my ear, and just
Isn't it one of your favorite sounds too? They purr in your ear and they just nestle in your neck. It's the greatest.
The best until those little claws and teeth come out, and then it's not the best. But
all right. So what have we got on the agenda today for topic, Chris?
Well, it's a topic that we've touched on a lot, I would say, in almost every podcast, but we've not devoted an entire show to it. And it is the topic of pet obesity.
Yeah. Well, without no pun intended, but it is a big, big problem in our pets. And I want you also to think not only when we talk about obesity in dogs and cats, that there are other pets that can get obese too. I mean, we're talking across the board. We don't want to see your dog fat, your cat, your ferret, your guinea pig, your rabbit, whatever you have.
And Cathy, haven't you treated some fowl that is, and then they can't get up on their little legs? Again, no pun intended.
Exactly. If they're overweight. Exactly. Yeah. So this is across the board, for all of our pets. They should not have excess weight on their frame.
Right. And, I think, as our listeners are listening, our intention is to not shame anybody.
No,
it's to educate and make you think about things that maybe you haven't thought about before, or maybe you have, but you just haven't implemented yet. So we're hoping that this podcast will be inspiring. And, for those of you that maybe you don't even realize your dog is overweight, I think that's typical a lot. And if you do know they're overweight, there are things that you can do to change it. And it doesn't take that much effort. It's just, being consistent. And we'll talk about, some of those habit changes and so forth as we move along here. So,
right. We are not, we're not shaming. And the other thing is, there are a fair amount of factors to obesity, and sometimes those are medicines or medical conditions. So no shaming, just trying to spark those wheels and owners and say, hey, is my pet put on a few pounds, and should I address this?
Exactly. So I think, maybe to start out, we should just talk about some general principles regarding food and treating and so forth. And, Cathy and I are not experts in nutrition by any means, but there are just some basic principles that I think I always coach my pet owners regarding. And the first thing is eliminate the people food and the table scraps, especially.
Well, you know what? I don't have, here's where it's going to get heated, Chris. I don't have an objection to people feeding something to their animals off their plate, as long as it's a good something. Okay. So if you wanted to give your dog, if you're eating a nice steak and you want to give your dog a piece of that steak, you give them a piece of this. Don't give them the grizzle. Don't give them the fat. Don't give them a piece with peppers and sauce and just a little piece, salt, just a little piece. Or if you're having vegetables, that's okay too. If you're having some peas without the butter, without the salt, without any of the other things that you put on it. So I have no objection to you giving something from the plate as long as it's a good something.
Yeah. And I guess that's where, I think if people are just trying to make some dramatic changes, that's hard, because I don't know very many people that eat people food without spices and additives, such as butter and things to make it more palatable.
Yeah.
Now, I was going to talk about later on, if you look on the internet, there's all kinds of things talking about green beans.
Yeah.
And a green bean, a raw green bean, our friend Libby has green beans for treats. Yeah. That's perfect because it's high in complex carbohydrates and fiber, and certainly less calories than your typical treat that you would buy in the pet food store.
Yeah.
So, as opposed to giving your pet something off your plate, people food is okay, but I'm kind of against scraps, I guess, because I think that takes a lot more planning and thought.
And scraps are like, I don't even like the word scraps. It's like, this isn't good enough to eat, so I'm going to give it to my dog as a scrap. We had corn on the cob the other day. So we made corn on the cob, and then we do not give our dog the cob, by the way. Just P.S. That's very dangerous.
Number one,
no
blockage thing for
but
the
what we
GI
did
tract.
is once we cooked it, is we just cut a little strip off, right? And then we buttered and salted and peppered ours. And then Mac had a little tiny bit of corn. Sure. For himself. Now those things are, it's kind of high in sugar. He just got a little bit of that taste of that, but with nothing on it. So I think you're right. And I think what you're looking at too is, it's like if you're eating jelly and toast and pancakes and stuff in the morning, that's probably the things that you want to eliminate. But some of those vegetables, raw vegetables, are good, and their calorie content is low.
Yes. And I think another thing, we were just visiting some friends in Maine, and I hadn't seen their dog in a few years. And at the time, she was overweight, maybe even obese. And last weekend, Ruby, she's like 14, a rescue, mixed breed. She was running around, rushing up to greet us, going up and down the steps, and had a perpetual smile on her face. Yeah. And the biggest thing that I noticed was she has lost weight. She now has that hourglass figure as opposed to the tubular figure that I'd seen in the past. And again, what I told them, and I don't think they ever fed, her food from the table or anything like that, but I said, eliminate the treats. It's all a matter of calories in, calories out. Right. And just by making that small but dramatic change, Ruby is now fit and in great weight.
Did you know, we have the ability in veterinary medicine to do a calorie calculations. So we can tell you exactly how much calories your dog needs to intake, right? And the other thing that what I do is people are like, oh, I can't eliminate the snacks. I'm like, okay, well, let's do a calorie calculation. And then we'll make you a snack bag. And whatever's in that snack bag is the only snacks your dog gets of that. And now if you give it all in the morning, then no more snacks. If you spread it out during the day, great, but it's still the same calories going in. And so if you can't eliminate those snacks, you can incorporate it as part of that calorie count.
Right.
So you get a couple of pieces of broccoli or a cucumber and maybe a Charlie bear or two, and add the calories into that if you feel like you can't eliminate snacking.
Exactly. And I think that's a mistake that a lot of people make is they may know, and I think everyone should ask their veterinary team what the number of calories their dog should be intaking for their ideal weight, not where they are now if they're already overweight, but what is that ideal weight calorie count and how do you get there? And then how do you maintain that? But the primary cause of obesity, and there are other contributors that we'll talk about, but it is an imbalance between the energy intake in terms of food, snacks, treats, whatever, anything that goes in their mouth, it all counts, and their usage.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not that complicated, and we're in charge of that, right? The dog, well, there are some that open the refrigerator and cupboards and sneak some food they shouldn't. But right. And to that end, if you feed your dog kibble, sometimes they don't need special treats or snacks. I think a lot of it is us thinking they do.
Yeah.
But again, in that total calorie count, we could feed them their entire calories throughout the day in the forms of enriching behaviors.
Right.
So you might give them a quarter of their food for breakfast in the morning and put it in a puzzle feeder because it slows down their eating, makes them feel full faster. They're enriched. And then you put a handful of kibble in your treat pouch. And as you're walking them that day, you give them those pieces of kibble.
Yeah.
And at night you play a game and you reward them with more kibble. And that meal is spread out throughout the day and there's no extras and it's all nutritious.
Yeah. And we do that with Mac actually, because he'll get fed at 7 and his dinner's at 3, but he'll ask at 1. So I'll take maybe a quarter of the 3:00 meal and put it in his snuffle ball, the one that we got from our friends at Superb Snuffles. And he'll chase that around for 10 minutes, and that satisfies him. So he's had some activity. He's gotten part of his dinner. He gets his dinner at 3, and then he gets a little tiny snack at 6, so he doesn't go to bed with an empty belly, but we spread it out. So it can be done.
And to your point with the snuffle ball, they are expending calories as they're ingesting calories.
Right. They're moving. Exactly.
Right. So it becomes, exercise, which we want to, touch on as well and promote. And I also think that it is smart to spread out their meals throughout the day, because any of you who have researched dieting for yourself may be familiar with the term glycemic index, and you want to keep your blood sugar or that glycemic index relatively level throughout the day. Right. So even if you don't do what Cathy suggested, but maybe feeding them 2 or 3 times during the day versus just in the morning, imagine how hungry you'd be 24 hours later, right? So I think it is healthier to, for many reasons, to kind of spread out those meals or the calorie intake throughout the day.
Right. And I'm hungry. Like I'll eat breakfast at 7 and then I'm hungry at 8:30. I get hungry easy, but Max seems to be very satisfied with that. And it's something he has to do some problem solving and moving. And he really enjoys that, especially in this heat when he can't go for big walks and stuff. So I like that quite a bit. Let's talk a little bit about some of the other, factors in obesity. I mean, we talked about calories in, and that, I think you're right, is probably the biggest factor in pet obesity. But there's also our pet's metabolism, their environment, some diseases and some medications can cause our pets to gain weight.
Right. And in terms of some conditions or diseases, the number one thing I think of is hypothyroidism.
Right.
I remember growing up, we had a Sheltie, and he was just a puppy, and he got so big, so fast, and had severe hypothyroidism.
Yeah.
So it's very, if your pet suddenly, gains weight and you're like, well, geez, they're not eating that much. I think the number one take home is go to the vet and say that, when we go to the doctor, they're always like, have you had, a shift, in weight up or down, more than 10 pounds in the last year. And I think that can be a red flag if that's true. And that's why that's kind of a general intake question, but think about that for your pets as well.
Yeah. And I think about the pet's metabolism as well. So our dogs that are younger, and as they age, that metabolism is going to change for them, and their caloric intake may need to change as well. So as your dog ages, I think it's important to check in with your doctor. Your 2-year-old compared to maybe your 13-year-old dog, those calories may need to be adjusted. So that can also be a factor in intake.
The demographic that I saw was primarily middle-aged dogs in terms of being overweight or obese. So, we're talking like that 8 to 10 range now that dogs are living longer. And also it's a bit controversial in terms of spaying or neutering, but the fact is that the hormones change And metabolism slows down a bit following a neutering or spaying procedure. So again, adjusting the calories following this. Now, this is not to say to not spay or neuter your pet. I certainly believe in that.
Yeah.
But again, just a slight adjustment in calorie intake, as you were suggesting, with aging.
Yeah. And I mentioned environment, and I think that can be a big factor in your pet's obesity as well. And I think the environment that's contributing, of course, is people we're feeding them. They don't have control over their meals. We're the ones who feed them, under the table or whatever, or however you do that. But I think there might be a misconception amongst people that maybe having a little extra weight on your dog is a good idea. Maybe if they get sick, they'll have some of this reserve. But studies show that even moderately overweight dogs can have a reduction in their lifespan. So I think there's a misconception in, maybe I should just have a few extra pounds on my dog.
Yeah. And I think that what we perceived as normal over the last couple decades in the US especially is too much weight. And to your point, there was a study that Banfield Pet Hospital did, and they found that the lifespan of overweight dogs was up to 2.5 years shorter on average than the lifespan of dogs with a healthy body weight. And this is a newer study. So again, continuing to prove that these, like you said, a little bit of extra weight can be very detrimental. And who doesn't want their dog to live longer?
I know, who doesn't, right?
They don't live long enough as it is.
And that's the one thing we really have control over, how much we feed our dog. And then, I think we're bombarded with these images of dogs on television, and even, when we watch the dog shows and these dogs are a little too big, in my opinion. And so sometimes it's hard for us to, as the public, go, what is my dog supposed to look like? I saw, a dog on television today, and that dog was, stocky or, whatever. So I think we're bombarded with images of dogs that might also be overweight. And then there's something that's also very, very simple that I found as a technician that people have trouble with. And they come in and I say, well, how much is your dog eating? And they go, well, my dog's eating a cup of food. And I'm like, I want to see the cup. Is it a measuring cup? What does a true cup of food look like? So then they come in with their coffee mug and they go, here's my cup of food. And I'm like, well, yes, that is a cup, a cup, but it's not a measured cup of food. So it's really important that we don't even don't eyeball it. Don't use your coffee cup, use the measuring cup. Don't compare your dog's size to a dog's size on television. You need to find out from your vet what they're supposed to look like and how much they intake and what is the appropriate amount of food to get.
Right. And to your point with the cup, I've talked to a lot of people who have said, I used to measure it and now I just eyeball it, as you suggested. Well, over time, it's very easy for it to just incrementally, gradually increase. And if they go back and, measure it or put that amount in their cup, they'll realize that now what was a cup is a cup and a half. And that's huge.
It is. And what if you have a little dog? What if you have a little Bichon, and just putting on 5 pounds on a dog like that is a tremendous amount of weight.
Right. And that's 50% more than they should be taking in if it goes from a cup to a cup and a half, and when you envision their stomachs, and these little breeds like a Chihuahua, I mean, their stomach's probably the size of a golf ball, So it doesn't take that much. I wanted to, before we move on too much, there are 2 other diseases that I wanted to mention. And one is Insulinoma, which can be caused by pancreatic cancer, and that can cause fluctuations in weight or weight gain. And the other is Cushing's disease. These dogs get, this kind of pot belly appearance, and that also is a contributor to weight gain. So again, just get your dogs worked up if they are gaining weight.
Right. And there are medications too, Chris. We touched on that a little bit that can also cause some weight gain. And the first thing I think of is steroids. So, steroids like prednisone make these dogs have, increased in their hunger and increased in their thirst. They want to take in more calories. And we can see those dogs, rapidly, gain weight on drugs like corticosteroids.
Yes. Yes. And I think it's important to appreciate that it is the drug talking and not your dog. Our little Dagny, who had epilepsy, was on prednisone her whole life. And we had to be very, very vigilant. I mean, she would eat herself sick, and it didn't take much. I mean, she fluctuated between probably 11 and 14 pounds, without us, because she's a little dog, without us really, realizing. But yeah, the same with steroids is, eat a lot, drink a lot, pee a lot, poop a lot, because what goes in has to come out at some point. But
I'm hungry. Well, interestingly enough, I was reading about, as we were preparing for today, about predispositions to obesity. Are there dogs that are predisposed to obesity? In my head, I was thinking, is that really, is that possible? But there is some indication that there are breeds at high risk for obesity. And not surprisingly, some of them are the dachshunds, beagles, cocker spaniels, and even some reports of Labrador retrievers and basset hounds. And sorry, Chris, the Cavalier King Charles.
Oh, Cathy, my research showed the pug.
Oh, that's funny. Mine didn't show that. Yeah, I don't know how that happened.
And even though these dogs have various reasons for their predisposition, it said, and I wrote this down because I wanted to remember, because I was going to jab you about it, that the pug, one of their reasons, besides being short-nosed and not being able to exercise maybe in the heat and those sorts of things, was that they tend to be coddled and pampered.
How dare you? Oh no. Yeah, I got called out there, didn't I?
Yes, you did.
Yeah,
yes,
I think that, I agree. Actually, I think that there is some truth to that. I think there is some truth to some of these animals that are coddled and pampered and maybe don't exercise quite as much as some of these larger breed dogs, and they sit at home and they,
One of the things that I read as well is when it comes to really small breeds, like, your Chihuahua, for example, they tend to be carried a lot. They're in purses and bags and things like that. So they're not getting the exercise. We talked earlier about calories in, calories out, and their stomachs being so small. So they may eat a normal ration for their size and breed, but yet if they're not getting the exercise to burn those calories, then they can gain weight. And some of these dogs are, have a predisposition due to medical conditions, which we just touched on. There may be a genetic, correlation there to Cushing's disease or hypothyroidism. But a lot of them, I was reading, just have voracious appetites. And I think, it's important to distinguish true hunger from, habits. Right. Or lifestyle or what have you, because I think there are certain dogs like Labradors that would just eat and eat and eat. They have a voracious appetite. And in fact, in terms of common breeds, Labradors and Golden Retrievers, some studies have shown that 60% of those breeds are indeed overweight.
Wow. Yeah. That's a high number.
And, with the labs, there's the English lab and the American lab. And I have, I wouldn't say argued, but challenged, some of my pet parents are like, well, my dog's an English lab. And so, they're shorter and stockier. They're supposed to look like this. And I'm like,
fat is fat.
That's true, but I still think they're overweight.
What I find interesting is you don't, in that same reading where I was, trying to find out if there's a predisposition, interestingly enough, you don't see a lot of overweight sight hounds. So you're not seeing a tremendous amount of fat Borzois or greyhounds or Afghan hounds, and they're less likely to develop obesity. And maybe that's in part to their metabolism, their exercise. I don't know, but you know what? I can't think of one sight hound that I know that's fat. And so it was just an interesting factor for me. Yeah.
Yes. And you say their metabolism, it must be great because they're known to be couch potatoes. I'm most familiar with greyhounds, right? So despite their size, unless they're out, running on a track, unfortunately, or, in the fields or something, because they will flee if they're given the chance, most of the time they're great apartment dogs and they just love to, be laying on the couch or, hanging out on their bed. I remember I did have a client a few years ago and I think he was a little bit embarrassed. He's like, okay, you're going to meet our greyhound and it's the only overweight greyhound you will ever see.
Oh man,
that's and it was not overweight. The title you want.
You don't want
like
that
morbidly
title.
Obese, but I'm like, how did that happen? He's right.
He's right. So what I actually would suggest to my clients if they want to go on a weight loss journey with their pet is, we talk to the veterinarian, we decide what's good for calories and how many calories, but also weigh your pet, weigh them about every 4 weeks. So I would weigh my patients who are in weight loss therapy for weight loss. I weigh them every 4 weeks, see where they're at.
Yep. Yep. And, and I think too, just like with people, the scale, I mean, it's a good tool to keep us accountable, but I think what people don't realize is that dogs first put weight on around their chest, kind of their midsection. And so, many people are like, well, they don't look fat. Well, you have to feel their ribs. And and it's kind of hard to describe, but see if you can follow along with me. This is kind of a simple little thing in terms of checking ribs that you can do. So when you feel your dog's ribs, if you make a fist and you run your finger over your fist and the ribs feel like that, your protruding knuckles, dog is probably a bit too thin. If you open your hand and turn your palm up and you feel those same knuckles, that is a little bit too much overweight. You have to kind of dig to feel for the bones and the joints there.
Yeah.
If you turn your hand palm down and feel your knuckles, that is ideal. So they're easy to feel, but they're not protruding. So if the ribs feel similar to your knuckles on the back of your hand, that's something easy that you can do to kind of check. It should not feel like you have to go through a sweatshirt, a down fleece, something like that.
That's very interesting and such a simple way to sort of get an idea. I did not know that. I was going to say, let's go to the body condition score. Let's go to the BMI score, the chart, because we can look at those dogs or get a sense from the top line about what those dogs look like. And I'll find a BMI chart, Chris, and we can post it in our show notes. I think that Purina has one. I think we can post up there.
Yeah.
And it's kind of similar to what Chris is saying, although we're running our hands down the dog from the shoulder down to the butt, over the ribs and to the tuck and to the, almost to the butt to see what that feels like. And it should feel like Chris said, on the top of your knuckles, palm down, but also there should be an hourglass appearance. If there isn't an hourglass appearance, your dog may be a little bit overweight. And if there's one, and if it's just one size from the shoulder to the rump, then your dog is, that's an overweight dog. And dogs, dogs that are 10 to 20% above their ideal body weight, those dogs are considered overweight. And if your dog is 20% or more overweight, those dogs are considered obese.
Yeah. Yeah. And that hourglass should be not only from the top, but from the side as well. So they should have a tuck up in their belly region, right between their ribs and their loin, if you will, and as well as on top, it should become thinner where their waist is. Right. Sometimes with fluffy dogs, I think that's a little bit harder to discern. So to your point, Cathy, putting your hands on them and, feeling if that actually insets there, I think is very important. And so I think that the ideal body condition score is somewhere around 5. And if they're over 7, that's considered to be obese. And ironically, our puppies, our Cavalier twins, had a lot of trouble actually putting on weight. They had some GI issues and things like that. And we've since rectified it. But I remember when they were puppies and we went to the vet that their body condition scores were 3. And I even had people like trainers and things like, your dogs are awfully skinny. I'm like, I know, I'm not starving them. I promise we're working on it. But, so at that scale, it has latitude, on either end. They can be too skinny or too large.
Too large.
Yeah. I want to touch on this a little bit because I think that there's a lot more, we talk about like abuse and neglect resulting in emaciation, dogs being horribly underweight. And I'm sure we've seen those images where it is basically a skin on a skeleton, and that's horrible.
Yeah.
But what if we reframed our thought processes the other direction? Is obesity, could that be considered abuse? Are we killing them with kindness, if you will?
Yeah.
I know in certain cultures, sharing food is an expression of love.
Yeah.
So I think that a lot of it is a perception thing, and that, it's not meant to be, nefarious or in any way, but it does result in some pretty bad life-threatening conditions.
Yeah. And if you see a dog that's really skinny, you're like, oh my God, that dog's being neglected. But if we see a dog that's really fat, we're like, he's just fat. But you are contributing to some significant health problems to your dog by keeping them in a state of obesity. And it's kind of a hot button, in veterinary medicine. You're right. Is this, you're right. I'm not sure what the word would be. Are we killing them with kindness? Yeah, we might be. We might be.
Yeah, let's talk about some of those.
It's a hot topic. It's a hot topic.
Let's talk about some of those conditions that obesity contributes to. I can't believe we're this far into the show and we haven't even touched on those, because I think there's going to be some things that our listeners may not be aware of.
Right.
This is from the Association for Pet Obesity Prevention, APOP. And
APOP.
Yeah. So a reliable source, that's definitely working to, decrease obesity amongst our pet population. And I'll just kind of go through the list and, and then we can kind of elaborate on some of these. So first is an exercise intolerance, or decreased stamina, breathing difficulties. I know myself, I've gained some weight recently and now I use a CPAP machine and so forth. But, dogs that are overweight may have noisier breathing and certainly pant more because they also have a heat intolerance.
Right.
Think about that extra layer of fat insulating them. And so they're less tolerant to heat. So that's, a major thing.
That's a problem.
We already talked about diabetes, liver disease, high blood pressure, cardiac disease, just like in people. There's also an increased surgical or anesthetic risk. And I think many people don't think about that.
Right.
A lowered immune system function and increased risk for malignant tumors or cancer. Now, I purposely left out one of them because this is the one that's near and dear to Cathy and my heart, and that's arthritis, osteoarthritis, degenerative joint disease, resulting in lameness, because we see this a lot.
Right. And we talked about this on another show about the study that they did, the lifetime study in labs where these dogs that had hip dysplasia showed significant increase in their comfort and mobility with just weight loss. So that's actually been studied. But the other thing that I think people maybe don't know is that fat actually contributes to inflammation, right? So it releases hormones that cause or enhance inflammation. So fat is actually sort of feeding this inflammation. And then what happens is we feed inflammation and that causes pain, and pain leads to decreased mobility, and decreased mobility leads to muscle wasting and loss of strength, and becomes a vicious cycle of pain and immobility. So it's a huge factor. See how I'm getting heated right now thinking about it. I hate fat. But I think it contributes to pain.
Yes. And I think when folks come to us for physical rehabilitation and, we start talking to them about their weight, sometimes I think that's unexpected or they're surprised. Many times people don't realize that their pets are overweight, and it's the groomer or the physical rehabilitationist or the vet that may, point that out, because it can be such an insidious thing.
Right.
But it helps our job, us to do a good job if you manage their weight, because if your dog has had knee surgery and, for a torn cruciate and they're overweight, their prognosis is not going to be nearly as good as that dog that's ideal weight or even, on the lean or thin side. So that's the first thing I say is if they are lean, I'm like, keep them lean. This is a weight bearing joint. It is never going to be the same despite having the surgery, and it's prone to arthritis. So, please keep their weight down as they age, because many times those dogs are young when they've, torn their cruciate, for example. They've got that whole lifetime. They've not even gotten to that middle age, metabolic slowdown yet.
Right. So. And I think it's important for us, to keep all of our dogs lean, but also dogs that are at risk for things like some of our chondrodystrophic breeds, they're at high risk for other things, back problems and so forth. So I think we have to keep everybody lean and then think about the kinds of conditions that these dogs may have or may get or predisposed to in their lifetimes, and keeping them lean will be
I'm
helpful.
glad you brought up the short-legged, long back dogs, because you mentioned their back and the spine also. It takes a toll. It's not just the joints of the legs, but any dog for that matter, or person, right? I mean, this is an awful analogy, but many pregnant women get back pain because, suddenly in 9 months, they're putting on a lot of weight and it's carried forward, and it really puts a lot of stress on their back. So if your pet has a pendulous abdomen and they're having to carry that weight around, it's putting a lot of stress on their back.
Yep. And we have to think of this in our cats too, because cats are at really high risk for obesity, diseases that are caused by obesity. So we're seeing cats again with an increase in diabetic cats, an increase in, people don't often bring their cats in for joint pain, but they do get joint pain just like our dogs do. And they are getting joint pain. They can't jump up on that table anymore because they're too fat and their joints hurt. So again, not just our dogs, but our cats. But also I've seen birds that are overweight. I've seen rabbits overweight. I've seen guinea pigs. Guinea pigs have a tendency to get overweight because they're just little eating machines. But again, we don't want them to be obese either, because we could shorten their lifespans as well.
Yeah. And I think, you talked about environmental things, and, for a lot of these other species, I don't think that we're doing enough to create exercise, for them. And so they eat and they hang out, they may not do a whole lot more. I'm embarrassed to say, when I was visiting my mom earlier this summer, that she has a chow hound for a cat. There's 3 in the house, and Riley is a big boy, and he steals the food from the other cats, and I can't get my mom to feed them separately. But I took him to his vet appointment for his vaccines and such, and the tech came out and her eyes were wide, and she's like,
"Oh boy,
Riley's gained 2 pounds since he was in last, which was 10 months ago." So that was like, a 20% weight gain in 10 months. That's huge.
Right.
So yeah, to your point, think about all the species and such. And we haven't talked about, exercise so much, but, I do think now we're paying more attention to, again, enrichment is kind of a buzzword.
Yes.
And so typically that is a mind body, kind of activity. And so they're more likely to burn, calories, but, simply taking your dog out on a walk, the lifestyle of our dogs has changed. And, many now are indoor dogs, and, by nature, they're more sedentary than, for example, when I was growing up. I'm 55, and, the dogs were, outside and running around in the yard, and, just naturally burning more calories. So we have to create those opportunities for our dogs to burn calories, and we have to be mindful of it.
Yeah. And if you haven't had a chance, I would go back, if you have a cat, go back and listen to our show that we did with our friend Tanera Kuznetsov. We talked about activity and environmental enrichment for cats. We got to play with those cats too. That's going to help expend those calories. They're hunters by nature, and if we play with them in even in short spurts throughout the day, that's going to help as well. It's going to help burn some of those calories. And then, we're just going back, a little bit, thinking about some of the other animals that might be obese. You and I have a mutual friend who thankfully helped me by adopting a guinea pig who was in need. And the first thing I did when I got her is go, man, she is fat. And I got her on an exercise and conditioning, program. And when I follow up with this friend of ours, she's doing really well. She's more active. She's happy. She's getting, she's doing her thing with the other guinea pigs, but she was too fat and she wasn't getting around very much. She wasn't moving very much, so I bet she feels a whole lot more comfortable too.
Right. And it just takes a little bit of creativity and, like I said, mindfulness, and it doesn't have to be, rocket science. I mean, it can be just simple little changes in their lifestyle, their environment, as you alluded to earlier. And, but I think the most basic thing is just get out there, when it comes to dogs, and walk your dog,
movement.
Yeah. Movement. And, I think Cathy and I like to, say ideally, if you could walk them, 2 or 3 times a day, versus just one big bolus of activity. But again, talking about, kind of feeding them throughout the day, exercising them throughout the day, and just keep everything, steady Eddie.
Mm-hmm.
You want to have something that's sustainable that you can
Right.
do. So, don't chomp off, again, no pun intended, too much at one time, but just make little changes and it can reap big rewards.
Yeah. And we don't want to go from, we're going to say, for weight loss that it's reduction in calories, and it is reduction in calories, and exercise, but don't like go home and just start giving your dog like just vitamin water. Like, I'm going to get rid of this fat today. That's not how it happens. I don't want you to living on pet tabs and water. To safely do that, again, we should talk with our veterinarians, find out what the ideal weight is, make a goal, a plan, like, okay, our goal is to lose 5 pounds. How much should we be losing every week? How much calories should my dog be taking in? And, identify things that we can do with our dogs. So if you have a senior dog, maybe you take them out for 3 10-minute walks. And if you have a younger dog, maybe you go for 3 40-minute walks. I don't know, depending on your dog and where they are in their lifestyle. But we could make a plan.
So, Cathy, I think that as we're winding down our show, one thing that I just want to kind of circle back to is, the equating food with love. And, I think about this when I went to my grandma's house, growing up. I mean, the first thing she did was, bring out the pies and the brownies and the candy, because that was her way of expressing love.
Right,
and,
right.
So many of the pet owners will say, the same thing, well, they like it. I can't stand to look at those begging eyes, those pleading eyes. We share an ice cream every night. It's a ritual, but you have to kind of reframe that thinking. And oftentimes we're creating these monsters, right? We get a little puppy and, maybe they're sitting in our lap at the table while we're eating. And how easy is that to then, give them a little morsel off your plate? But if you put them in a crate while you're eating, or teach them to be in a place, maybe in another room or away from the table, then you're not dealing with that dog begging and looking at you, pleadingly for that morsel of food.
Right. And I talked earlier about not having an objection to giving my dog a little bit off my plate, but I don't let my dog, sit at the table. I don't let him beg at the table. He has his place. And when he gets something from my plate, it goes in his bowl and his dish where he eats. But also the other thing is, you got to be cognizant of other people that come to your house too, because I don't know. I mean, maybe people think it's fun to like give your dog a hot dog at a barbecue or whatever, piece of chicken, but it's not. And it's disrespectful, and it's not good. People need to know the rules when they come into your home. Our dog doesn't get a hot dog when you're at the barbecue. One time I had some lady give my dog a piece of lemon cake at a bar, and it was too late. It went right in. Like, she was like, here you go. And no, it was too late. Cake went in. Yeah. But that's not cute. And that's not funny. And my dog could have been sick from that.
Absolutely.
So
there are dietary intolerances and things,
right,
beyond just the extra calories. Right. So,
and people need to respect that when they come to your home. And so sometimes, I guess sometimes you could consider, crating the dog when company's over, or saying, company, listen, these are the rules in our house. Our dog doesn't eat from the table. If you'd like to give my dog a cookie, then come to me and I'll give you something that's appropriate for my dog to have. Mm-hmm. But also you can redirect my dog. He doesn't have to have a snack. You know what else he likes? Attention, play. Right. We could redirect into a game that doesn't include food. So people need to respect those rules in your home as well. And you're right. Some dogs have allergies, and some dogs have dietary limitations, and some dogs have, sometimes have gastrointestinal problems. Yeah. It's not funny to give my dog. Exactly. Don't give my dog a hot dog.
Yeah.
We don't even know what's in hot dogs. We don't even know.
Exactly. But I love them all the same.
Yeah.
So I want to just mention before we conclude here too, that I don't know if our listeners know the world record for the largest dog was an English Mastiff named Zorba.
Wow.
Not too long ago. I think 2019, Zorba got this record. Guess, Cathy, how much Zorba weighed?
Well, I'm going to have to say like 200 pounds. No?
343 pounds.
Oh my God.
And I don't care how much exercise that dog got, or how big its skeleton was. Crazy. Darn well that 343 pounds was overweight, obese.
Yeah. Holy cow, Chris.
I know.
Wow.
I know. So I thought that would be shocking. That's for our audience.
Yeah, that is shocking.
So I want to leave our audience with some tips in terms of empowerment. So we've talked a lot, but what can we do about it beyond what we've already discussed? So first and foremost, consult your veterinary team, know what your dog's healthy weight should be, keep them active, burn those calories, distinguish between begging behavior and actual hunger. Okay. And limit the treats and table scraps. Notice I said limit, not necessarily have to eliminate.
Let's not use the word scraps either. Let's use, a good piece of.
Yes. Yeah. Well, you should eliminate the scraps.
It's scraps. Nobody wants scraps. You don't want scraps. I don't want scraps.
Right. And I think, though, a lot of people to that point, like they'll finish what they're eating and then they put the plate on the floor.
Right. Right.
And so it's the icky stuff.
It's the icky stuff.
Yeah. And, maybe customizing your dog's diet, along again with your veterinary team. Don't go cold turkey. Again, this is a slow and gradual process, and then stick to it. Make sure that it's a sustainable change, both in terms of what you're providing them and as calorie intake and energy, but also that you can stick to the exercise program that you're implementing as well. So those tips come from the AKC, and I think that's a pretty reputable source, and hopefully that people can implement those easily.
Absolutely. And let all the people that come into your home know the rules. Everybody should know the rules. Everybody needs to know the rules. The rules.
So Cathy, I think that this episode of PetAbility has just been jam-packed full of great information that can empower our owners, and let's change at least, the U.S. From a society of overweight dogs. Again, there's well over 50% of dogs and cats that are overweight or obese. Let's start changing that and start feeding our dogs love and not excess food.
Food.
Feed love, not excess food.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Chris. That's a great one to leave our listeners with.
You're welcome, Cathy. Great to see you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us. We hope you enjoyed our show. Follow us on Facebook or on Instagram at PetAbility Podcast.
For more information about Cathy's books and living with blind dogs, please go to enableyourpet.com. Thank you, and please tune in next time.